Welcome to this SAP TechEd session about integration flow design guidelines and patterns. My name is Alexander Bundschuh. I'm with the product management for the Cloud Platform Integration Suite. So I would like to start with a brief introduction into the Cloud Platform Integration Suite. So if you take a look at today's landscapes, you encounter that they become more heterogeneous, more hybrid, and for seamless integration, so seamless integration is actually a key for the intelligent enterprise, right? And that's exactly where we position the Cloud Platform Integration Suite. So the Cloud Platform Integration Suite is a comprehensive integration platform as a service offering running in the cloud, supporting cloud and hybrid integration needs. So it's supporting different integration needs like process integration, API-based integration, event-based integration or event-driven integration, data integration, and so on. Right. I don't like too much focus on the integration suite as such. There is a separate session by a colleague of mine. I come to this then at the end of my presentation. What I would like to focus more is on the integration design guidelines, right? And if you look at what the Cloud Platform Integration Suite offers, it not only focuses on the technical capabilities of an integration platform, it also provides solutions to your business needs, to your business requirements. So it comes with a number of different pre-delivered integration packages, which we provide on the API Business Hub. So there are around 450 different packages on the API Business Hub with around or with more than 1,500 single integration flows, right? And those integration flows actually need to fulfill specific qualities. So our LOB teams and also the partners building this content, they need to follow specific guidelines to meet those qualities, right? There are guidelines about naming conventions, about how to tag the content, about the description or the modeling as such, right? And if you start building your own integration flows, you would also need to follow specific guidelines to ensure that you build robust integration scenarios, right? So in the following, I would like then to show you what we provide, what we have provided here. So we actually have provided so-called integration flow design guidelines and patterns that help you to build enterprise-grade integration scenarios. So beginning of this year, we have shipped around 30 different guidelines. This is part of the standard documentation. So you find this on SAP Help portal. So for each guideline, we have a reference integration flow, and we describe this in reference integration flow in the Help portal. Beside this, we ship different packages for the different categories of the guidelines. There are packages for security, for instance. There is a package for resource handling or a package for the actual patterns. And each of those packages, they have then those reference integration flows and a postman collection. So you can use this postman collection to deploy, run, and test those integration flows with low effort, right? In the following, I would like to show this in a demo.
Let us first open the API Business Hub. The URL is easy to remember. It's api.sap.com. On the API Business Hub, you can find APIs, business processes, events, and also prepackaged integrations from both SAP and partners. We now simply search for the term integration flow design guidelines. Integration flow design guidelines. And this now shows me 7 packages in total. So right now 7 packages. One actually describing the patterns, the enterprise integration patterns, and the rest of the packages, the actual guidelines. So we have topics like improving the readability of my integration flows, handling errors, applying security standards, how to use the partner directory and its API, package about external dependencies, and a package about resource handling of the actual tenant runtime. So we are constantly updating the guidelines, and we are also adding new packages. So as said, right now we have 7 packages. This is actually growing. On the roadmap, we plan to ship a package about handling scripts. Right, this will be released soon. And also a package with a sort of getting started guidelines. Let us now select one of the packages, the apply highest security standards package here. So this opens up the package. You see an overview, right, with a description of this specific guideline category. And you also find documents. I come to this in a minute. I will first switch to the integration tab. And on the integration tab, you find the actual guidelines, so the actual integration flows. There are topics that we cover like applying message level security, removing sensitive content, or uploading WSDL to an integration flow instead of accessing a WSDL remotely. What you also find actually in each package is the so-called generic receiver here. So the generic receiver is actually mocking a receiver. You access a generic receiver via Process Direct, and each guideline would at the end then send a message to this generic receiver. And what it does is that it simply puts a message into the data store for monitoring purposes. You can select any of the integration flows to get the integration flow model displayed. As an example, I would go through the last guideline in the list here, and this is about cross-site reaches forgery, right? So if you exchange messages via HTTP-based protocols, actually in case of modifying HTTP requests, such as a post operation, you actually need to protect your system against cross-site reaches forgery. For this guideline, as you can see, we actually do have 2 integration flows, right? One acting as sender and one acting as the receiver system. So I first open the one acting as a receiver system. This is this one here. So here, this is a very simple integration flow. What's important is actually the configuration on this HTTP sender side. If I switch to the connection tab, then you see that the HTTP endpoint is CSRF protected. So actually, if you create an HTTP sender channel, the CSRF protection flag is selected by default. So I go back and enter the second integration flow, the sender side. So for the sender integration flow, I need to ensure that the receiver HTTP base adapter enables CSRF protection. And depending on the adapter, this might be natively supported, like for the OData adapter. For the HTTP adapter, actually this needs to be modeled explicitly, right? And you can see here in the model that we first fetch an CSRF token, and then we use this token for the actual call here. Let's now switch back to the Details tab. For testing the guidelines, we have added a Postman collection here. For sure, you can also use your own HTTP client, but in case that you prefer Postman, you can run the test with minimal effort. You also find 2 links pointing to the SAP help portal. So the first link actually opens the documentation explaining how to run the test, right, and how to also use the Postman collection. And the second link here points to the documentation of this specific guideline. So in our case, applying higher security standards. So let us navigate to this documentation. So as you can see, for each guideline, you find an own sub-chapter. Let us select the Use CSRF Protection Guideline. So for each guideline, you find a description of the guideline, so a rationale, and you find also the description of the implementation. So in our case, the guideline is schematically explained. So you can see here, so the first sender, first integration flow is actually fetching a CSRF token, and this is done actually used to log on to the actual receiving system. So next I would like to show you the structure of the documentation and also show you what other guidelines and categories exist. All right, I collapse this here. So from the navigation tree, you can see where the integration flow design guideline resides, right? You find this below the cloud platform integration, documentation, below development, right? Where also all other features are actually described. Below the integration flow design guidelines, you find a chapter about how to work with the example integration flow. As you have seen, you can also directly navigate from the package to this chapter. If I open up the how to work with the example, then you can see here that we are describing the testing from end to end by copying the packages, how to work with the postman, a bit about how the generic receiver works. And some guidelines actually use a web shop demo example, right? That this is also explained here. I come to this in a minute. The guidelines itself are grouped according to the different categories, as we went through the categories before, right? Like running an integration flow under well-defined boundary conditions. So it's about resource handling, then dependencies to external systems, about readability, error handling, prepackaged integration content, security, and the partner directory. And then we have one chapter about the patterns. So this describes the most commonly used patterns, how to implement this actually on cloud platform integration. So we cover here stateless and stateful patterns like aggregator, composed message processor, content-based routing, content enricher, content filter, message filter, recipient list, scatter, gather, and splitter. So let me now show you how to run any of the guidelines from end to end. For this, I will actually pick a guideline within the run and integration flow under well-defined boundary conditions chapter. And this is the specify proper session handling guideline. So assuming you have to do multiple HTTP calls to one and the same external system, right? This would require an authentication for each single call. By reusing an HTTP session, you can reduce the number of authentication and at the end, then improve the overall runtime performance. Like for the CSRF protection guideline, here we also have two integration flows, right? One acting as the sender and the other acting as the receiver system. So we use here an own receiver system with an HTTP endpoint instead of the generic receiver, which, as explained before, uses Process Direct, so that we can actually simulate a remote call situation. When you scroll down, you find a screenshot of the model here. So let's now open the tenant. And I go to the discovery area of my tenant. I'm searching for this package, so I can put in boundary condition. And here we go. I select the package and then I copy this package to my workspace. The package has been copied. Now I go to my workspace. This is the design in this navigation pane. And I'm entering the beforehand copied package. So on the Artifacts tab, you find the different integration flows. As said before, for this guideline, I need to deploy two different integration flows, right? This is the integration flow acting as the receiver system, and this is the integration flow holding the actual guideline. So I will already trigger the deployment now, right, of the receiving system and also of the actual guideline. So now let's go through the integration flow model where we have implemented the actual guideline. This is this one. I switch to the Run Configuration tab, and here you can see that we have defined the HTTP session reuse on Exchange, right? So you have three options: none, on Exchange, or on integration flows. If you choose on integration flows, here you would then reuse the HTTP session across exchanges, but for this very same integration flow model. So our receiver here is CSRF protected, right? So that we first fetch an CSRF token. When we do the token call, we then authenticate towards the service provider, and the response then contains both the CSRF token and the session cookie because of this setting here below. Then we do a parallel split here with the channel splitter, and this ends up with multiple calls in parallel. And for all subsequent calls, then the session cookie is used to log on to the receiver system. Good. Now I switch back one level up and switch to the Documents tab. And in order to be able to test this, I first need to download the Postman collection, right? Which I do here. This is now downloaded. Good. Once downloaded, I need to unzip this here. So I open the Postman collection, select import, and then I import the collection to the uploaded files section here. Then you can see a new collection has been added, the manage resources. Below you find different tabs for the different guidelines, and we actually use here the session reuse. So you can see that there are two requests. One is actually for the token call because we also have CSRF protected our guidelines, and the actual post. In the Postman we use variables for host, user, password, and so you need to maintain an environment. So I've done this already. So I've maintained an environment for my tenant. So you can see that username, password, host has been already maintained. Before running the test, let's see if the integration flows have been successfully deployed in the meantime. So I go back to the tenant, switch to the monitor section, and then I go to manage integration content, and I see that both integration flows have been successfully deployed. I go back to the monitoring and go back to my Postman collection, and now I run the token call. This went through with an HTTP 200, and then I do run the actual request, and if I click on the body, you can see that we actually send a purchase order with multiple items here, and then in the integration flow this message will be split according to the number of items. This will be split then into multiple messages. I also send this, and this went through. I also get an HTTP 200 here. Then let's go back to the monitoring, and you can see that the number of messages has been increased in my monitoring message processing area. So another 11 messages have been added. So one for the first integration flow and 10 for the receiving system, because I actually have sent an order with 10 items and then this message has been split into 10 items. You can also navigate now to the data store. Here on the data store, then you find a new data store entry with 10 entries. For each message you find one entry. Now you can select those entries and download the payload for monitoring purposes. So in case that you like to verify the HTTP session reuse, then you can go to the content here and switch on the tracing. I change tracing. Let's go back to Postman, resend. Now go back to monitoring again. Enter the message processing log, and then I can here select the first entry, open the text view of the message processing log. So in the message processing log, you can then see, if you scroll down to the first call where we fetch the token, we use basic authentication and a cookie session is set, right? And if you scroll down, then you can see that this cookie actually is then reused.
So let's recap what we have just shown in the demo. So I've shown you where you can actually access the integration flow design guidelines. I've touched a bit the patterns. We come in more details to the patterns in a minute. I have shown you where you can actually access the packages with the sample integration flows, right, on SAP API Business Hub. And I have shown you how to test sample integration flows from end to end, also using the Postman collection that we provide as part of the package. Now let's move on. And in the following, I would like to show you how the integration guidelines and especially the patterns actually help you to transition to SAP's hybrid integration platform, right? For this, I would first like to set the context and explain how we do hybrid integration today, right? So as mentioned before, Cloud Platform Integration Suite is our strategic integration platform in the cloud, running in the cloud for cloud and hybrid integration needs. So it actually supports process integration, data integration, API-based integration, and event-driven integration, including extensions, right? You can leverage from different open connectors so that you can connect to third-party applications more easily. You can accelerate your integration projects by using the content that we provide. So as said, we have more than 1,500 different integration flows provided by us, by SAP, and by our partners. On the other side, there are many customers using either process integration or process orchestration for their on-premise integration needs, right? Process integration has been shipped around 2001, and this is for process integration needs. Process orchestration is a more comprehensive solution comprising process integration, business process management, business rules management, and B2B EDI capabilities. Right nowadays, we position process orchestration as our strategic integration platform on the cloud, complementing Cloud Platform Integration Suite, which is more suited for hybrid and cloud integration. With release 7.5, we actually have co-deployed the Cloud Platform Integration Suite runtime inside process orchestration so that you can model or that you can run scenarios that you have modeled on Cloud Platform Integration Suite within Process Orchestration on-prem, right? And this allows you to build new integration scenarios so you can actually leverage the feature-rich capabilities of Cloud Platform Integration Suite and the more flexible design environment of Cloud Platform Integration Suite within Process Orchestration. Good. What's the path ahead? So we have received customer feedback that there is a need actually for a more lightweight on-prem runtime, on-premise runtime within the hybrid integration suite. So, and actually that's what we plan to do, right? So we actually target to have a more lightweight local runtime or on-prem runtime as part of the future hybrid integration suite or hybrid integration platform. So this will be running on-prem, so the customer actually needs to maintain this, operate this. Design time, configuration, monitoring will be in the cloud, right? Runtime will then be on-prem if your systems are running completely on-prem. The runtime will be leveraging container technology, such as Docker. So for this, it's actually more lightweight compared to the full-blown NetWeaver stack of a process orchestration system. And the runtime can hold any kind of different Cloud Platform Integration Suite services or engines, right? So it can hold a worker node that you can run your process integration scenarios. It can run an API proxy in order to enforcing traffic and security policy. It can hold a messaging system for your event-based processing, for instance, and it can also hold a cloud connector to secure the connection between the cloud and on-prem. And other than for process orchestration, we actually like to keep the software lifecycle of this local integration runtime, this on-prem integration runtimes, in sync with the cloud delivery speed. Right. So we have recently published an SAP Insider article where we provide guidelines for an IT architect to move or to transition from process integration, process orchestration to the Cloud Platform Integration Suite, and also then to the new hybrid integration platform once it is in place. And here, in a nutshell, we have defined 3 different actions. First action is migrating to NetWeaver 7.5, because all lower releases, lower than 7.5, they're actually running out of maintenance by end of this year. So there is a need that you migrate your system, which is on lower release, to 7.5. And in this context, you might also then migrate your process integration dual stack system to a single stack process orchestration system. We have recently enhanced the maintenance window of 7.5, so actually until 2027, with extended option until 2030, so that also your investment are secure until 2030. Second action is that you start using Cloud Platform Integration for scenarios that are running in the cloud and or for hybrid integration scenarios. And in this context, also start using the cloud integration runtime within process orchestration. And while you are, for instance, migrating from a PI dual stack system to a process orchestration system, you might also consider migrating the CC-BPM scenarios into in the way that you reuse the cloud integration runtime inside process orchestration, because this actually supports any kind of integration-centric scenarios. And the last action is that you start moving integration scenarios from process orchestration to cloud platform integration systems where needed. Right? And if you do this, our integration flow guidelines and our patterns can help, right? And this I would like to show you now in the next demo. So I've actually published a blog series about the integration flow guidelines and the patterns, where I actually describe how the patterns, the most common patterns, are modeled on process orchestration in comparison to Cloud Platform Integration Suite. So let's go now to my demo.
Let's start a demo on the SAP Cloud Platform Integration Suite community page. You can access the Future-Proof Your Integration Strategy paper from there. It's below featured content, right? I just click on this read article link, and this opens up the SAP Insider article. So if I scroll down, where we describe the 3 actions. So upgrading to SAP NetWeaver 7.5, building new agile integrations with SAP Cloud Platform Integration Suite, and moving existing integration scenarios to the suite if applicable. If you scroll down, you find a link to my Enterprise Integration Patterns blog series, right? From here I can navigate to this blog series within the community. This opens up the very first blog. This actually covers the scatter-gather pattern. Within this blog series, I actually describe how to model the most commonly used enterprise integration patterns on SAP Cloud Platform Integration. So in the very first blog, I give some explanation about the intention of the blog series, so the use cases. So for instance, you're familiar with process integration or process orchestration, the way how you implement integration scenarios on SAP Process Integration, SAP Process Orchestration, and you would like to start modeling on Cloud Platform Integration. So this should actually then help you to jumpstart getting familiar with Cloud Platform Integration, modeling environment, and the capabilities of Cloud Platform Integration. Or you plan to move selected integration scenarios from process integration, process orchestration to Cloud Platform Integration. Another use case would be you like to use the cloud integration runtime on process orchestration to leverage the feature richness and flexible modeling capabilities of Cloud Platform Integration Suite. And the last use case is here, assuming you plan to migrate from a process integration toolset system to process orchestration, and you might have cross-component BPM processes. So there is an option to, instead of using BPM on process orchestration, you might then use the cloud integration runtime. So if I scroll down, so for each of the different patterns, I explain first how this is modeled on process orchestration. Here in our case, we actually use BPM, right? And then further down, then I explain how this is modeled on Cloud Platform Integration. And at the end of each block, then you find the complete list of blocks within the series. And I would like to showcase you this now based on the content-based router, right? Let's open the content-based router block. And I scroll down to this picture here. So as you can see, that's the way how we model a content-based router on process orchestration. This is actually using the NetWeaver Developer Studio, where we model the so-called integration flows. And here you can see that we support different routing techniques, dynamic message router. So this is based on a mapping that you carry out. Static routing, so simple XPath expression, and receiver rules. Those are more or less reusable XPath conditions. Furthermore, you have different options depending on receiver not found situations. Either ignoring this error, generating an error message, or send the message to default receiver. And those 3 options we actually have modeled on Cloud Platform Integration Suite. Yeah, let's close this. Let's go to the SAP API Business Hub. So I've opened the package already, right? The integration flow design guidelines, enterprise integrations patterns. And let's switch to the integration tab. I switch to the list view. So you can see here that we have 3 different integration flows describing those different options. So the first one would ignore the message if the receiver cannot be determined. The second one would raise an error. And in the third one, you would simply send a message to a default receiver. Let's open the first one. So here you can see we first store the XPath expression in a property. We do this for better monitoring and traceability purposes. And in the routing condition, then we use this property. You can see that we either route to the Netherlands or Germany, and the default route actually routes a message to an end event. So that means that the message is simply ignored. The other options where we raise an error, here the condition is similar. We either route to Germany or the Netherlands, but in case that the receiver could not be determined, the default path raises an error, and this error is then fetched in an exception subprocess. In the last option here, we send to a default, so either one of the receivers has been defined as default route. Good, let's get back to the first block, and I would like to point to the community. So there is also a lot of material available on the community, and I would like to point out the great blog series from Bundschuh. I also have mentioned this here in my very first blog, and if I navigate to his blog series, then you can see here a list of different patterns that he has described so far. And actually, he intends to cover all 65 enterprise integration patterns, which are explained in the book of Gregor Hope and Bobby Wolf. And he actually blogs about a new pattern almost every week. So it's definitely worthwhile.
So if you're interested in other integration related sessions, please do take a look at this page here. So there is an introduction into Cloud Platform Integration Suite from Harsh Ekadesan. There is a session about migrating from Neo to Cloud Foundry, so supported on the multi-cloud environment by two colleagues of mine. And there is a session about non-SAP integration and also two roadmap sessions. Then also take a look at the Learning Hub platform, right, providing you more digital material, learning material. And with that, I'm at the end of my session. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for attending.